I'm Peter White. Welcome to the Inside Network. Welcome to INDepth. I'm Peter White, and my guest today is Dr. Jon Glass.
Thank you again.
Welcome, John. Now, you've started a new business, 64 Plus.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit about yourself and the business and how we got to where we are?
I once had a career as a mathematician. I've got a PhD in pure mathematics, but that's decades ago. I spent almost 40 years in the investment industry, working in funds management and asset consulting. And it was when I stopped full-time work 6 years ago that, I'll be quite frank, I was a bit lost. I didn't know what to do.
Was it?
Black hole would be
Avoid?
good. A void, a black hole, all those things. And I wandered around my house thinking, what do I do now? Do I go back and find another job in the investment world or somewhere else? Or do I break out and find a new way of living? And it just so happened I'd been studying counselling at a college for a few years because I like that. I find that very interesting. And so, having wandered around in circles till I was dizzy for a few months, I thought, okay, maybe I can be a retirement coach. I didn't even know what that was, but I thought there must be other people like me who would benefit from a coach who could sit with them patiently and listen, because coaching is all about listening to their story about what they will do in retirement. And for me, the defining activity of retirement coaching is to help the client to discover their meaning or purpose in retirement. And that's what I do.
Meaning and purpose in life.
Meaning or purpose in life. But particularly, let's say someone...
That's a pretty high hurdle, though.
It's a very high hurdle, and I'm not saying I have the answers, and in fact, it's the other way around. My clients have the answers. My job is to excavate those answers through patient, good questioning, and then eventually after 6 sessions, hopefully they'll come up with the answer.
Of course, there are many ways or many forms of retirement. Can you speak to that issue of the different forms of retirement, or how retirement can look different for different people?
It certainly can. So perhaps the traditional form of retirement is the gold watch and drinks on a Friday evening. That's what we're used to. We've seen it in the movies, and that still happens, of course, and that's fine. There's the moving from full-time work to part-time work and then to full-time retirement. That's fine. And all of these are very personal and contextual. There's also what I call the pine box methodology, which is people who say, I'll never retire. And that's fine. But there are people who have the pine box methodology and wake up one morning and find they've been made redundant. So there are many paths to retirement. But I think most of all, it's the psychology inside a person's mind when they retire. So I like the phrase relevance deprivation syndrome. There are people who don't want to retire because they think, on the other side, I won't be relevant anymore. They think on the other side, I will be useless. And then the paradox is that there's both hope and fear built into the same issue. So take time in retirement. There are some people who hope to have a lot of free time when they retire and can't wait. And there are people who fear that they'll have too much free time and therefore don't want to retire. And yet it's two sides of the same coin.
Well, we're talking about anticipation and planning. Why is it difficult to plan for retirement? What do you see in your daily activities and interaction with people in this potential phase, looking at over the cliff at retirement
it is difficult.
At the field?
It's a funny thing how when we're at school or perhaps university, there are people called careers counsellors who help us to decide what we will do with our lives once we graduate. Yet in our society, we don't have rigorous, full dialogues about retirement. We don't have very much belief in retirement coaching, and obviously I think there should be such a thing. So it's as if our society has not yet got to the level where it thinks collectively that actually people need some help when they retire. It's not a simple matter of moving from one phase of life to the next, although it can be for some. I'm not suggesting everyone needs help. All I'm getting at is that some people certainly do, but our culture doesn't seem to promote the idea of getting that help.
Is there a trend for people to work longer? Look, governments are outlawing ageism in certain things, and you can't force people to retire in some areas. Not in the big accounting firms. I think they make you retire at 50 or 55. But what's the trend that you see? And what are the implications of that trend or trends?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I would just put forward that there's probably a counter force, which is COVID-19. So I don't know the numbers, but I imagine a lot of people have been forced into retirement through redundancy as a result of COVID-19. So my response is I think it's quite a fluid situation. And so the classic concept of you reach 65, have the Friday night party with the gold watch, and everyone says, good luck. And then you might move into the Monday morning and think, oh, I'll just go back to work and see the guys because they still love me. Well, it probably turns out that they don't, because you're no longer relevant in their life. So that relevance deprivation syndrome, I think, is one of the fears that people have that prevents them from making a natural transition into retirement.
You must be familiar with research on retirement. Are more people happy in retirement or unfulfilled in retirement? What are the stats Australia-wise and globally in terms of what people are feeling when they do retire?
We know that around 300,000 people retire every year in Australia. That's a fact, give or take. What we don't know, or certainly I don't know, is how to classify those people into the I couldn't wait.
Hugh Mackay hasn't done any research on that?
Not that I'm aware of. The people who couldn't wait to play golf 7 days a week, the people who couldn't wait to go on 8 cruises every year, the people who couldn't wait to be grandparents. You know, they talk about the 3 Gs of retirement: golf, gardening and grandparenting. What I've not seen is any stats that give me a sense of whether people are content or unhappy. And I think
what's your sense that are people content, most people content or not, do you think?
I'd be happy to admit that most people are content, whatever that means. But I think, given that we all have a public face, which is the face we show when we're out and about, and I noticed that yesterday walking past a table full of people in my age group, they were all laughing and happy, drinking their coffee, eating their cakes. That was their public face.
What they go home to hit the bottle, do they? No,
quite possibly. What we don't have access to is what they're really feeling when they take off that mask. And this is something I love, the metaphor of the mask, because, as I said earlier, I've been involved in theatre. I love theatre. Theatre is all about the mask being on or off. What happens when people go home and take off the mask? To answer your question, I suspect a lot of them are unfulfilled, don't have meaning, don't have purpose, and just need that little bit of patient help to work out who they are.
I know I've heard you talk about 3 phases of retirement, or there's the pre-retirement and phase 1 and phase 2. Can you talk us through that?
Sure. Pre-retirement is, I think, where many people would benefit from having a coach to help them think through what will happen to them in the next phase. So the next phase is you cross the bridge into retirement, and I'll come back to that, and you are in that first flush of retirement, which could be exhilarating. You're out on the golf course, you're with your friends, that's all well and good. But the third and final phase, I think, is when retirement sets in, and you may want to review what you've been doing for the last few years. But if I could concentrate on that middle phase of crossing the bridge into retirement, what people start to realise, either because they've been helped to realise this or it's come to them in a revelation, is that you lose the routine you had when you worked. So when I worked full-time, Monday morning was get up early, put on the suit, get takeaway breakfast, sit at the desk, clear the emails, etc., etc. I think this would be a familiar routine to many people. That routine vanished on the day that I retired. So you lose the routine, and you then, I think, are confronted with, do I want to replace the routine, or am I happy I've lost the routine? You also, in crossing the bridge into retirement, no longer have that validation, which doesn't always happen, not every day, but when the boss comes up to you, pats you on the back and says, job well done, John. Wonderful feeling. You're not necessarily going to get that validation in retirement, but if you feel you need it, then there are ways to get it. For example, you could do charity work and you could be valued for what you do. You could feel valued, you could give value to other people, and most importantly, you connect with your own deepest values. And this is at the heart of what I do with my clients. It's helping them to uncover their values. Do they want to give to charity? Do they want to learn and go back to school and study something? Do they want to travel? Do they want to be social and make lots of friends? That's their question to answer, not for me to answer.
Speaking about the practicalities of retirement, how do you rate the availability of income funds or income solutions for people in retirement in Australia? Are we well served or poorly served or somewhere in between? What's your view on that?
The way I think about it is that many people begin from the income side. They think, I have to maintain a lifestyle with an annual income, I think most people either have that in their minds, or if they're rigorous about it, they have a spreadsheet and they know how much they pay for electricity and how much they pay for coffee. But in either case, whether it's rigorous or just a loose feeling, they want a certain amount of income every year. So it seems to me a retirement product should be able to provide that income. But that's where it gets tricky, because you've got to think about the income, the capital preservation, the longevity, the inflation protection. And that's, of course, where financial planners come in and do the detailed work. But I'm not sure there's a whole lot of those products available. That could be my ignorance. But what I'd say, going back to the beginning, is that most people have a concept of, do you remember Norman Lindsay's The Magic Pudding? The magic pudding was that pudding, I think it was a plum pudding, you eat it, it regenerates. I think people have in their minds the unconscious idea that there'll be a flow of income that suits their retirement aspirations forever.
What sort of experiences have you had and feedback from clients in this journey that you're on? Can you give us some insights into the different reactions, positive and negative, and successes and failures with what you've experienced so far?
Well, I've certainly had my share. I think that's a quote from Frank Sinatra, maybe not, of successes and failures. I work with clients over 6 sessions of 1 hour, typically in a coffee shop or over the internet, but somewhere relaxed where we can talk and listen to each other. And success for me is helping the client to discover their own meaning or purpose in retirement, which, as I alluded to before, could be on the golf course 7 days a week. It could be on a cruise ship. And if I could stop there for a minute, one matter I emphasise to clients, which will be familiar to financial planners, is the need to have diversity. Because in the end, I try to help clients to uncover the activities they want to engage in their retired life. And I've heard anecdotally about people who base their retired life on 7, 8 or 9 cruise ship trips every year. And I think to myself, that was probably really good up until January 2020. Now that's looking like a pretty sorry strategy. Diversification is important. So play your golf, be with your grandchildren, write your book, study your history, whatever, but have many activities. And so to come back to your question, a successful outcome for a client would be they have a sense of their purpose in retirement, their meaning, which could be give charitably, could be learning, it could be socialising. Then we build out with a bit of investigation, a set of activities, and then I say to them at the last session, go out there and do it. So I've had many successes in that regard. Without mentioning names, I probably have had a few. Failure is a strong word, but I've had a few failures.
And what have been the roadblocks or the causes of failures because it sounds to me like you're almost an amateur psychologist to a certain extent. And where have you had some roadblocks with not achieving what you would hope for those clients?
I would say precisely where people don't want to disclose what they really feel, where they themselves put in place the roadblocks, where they obstruct further investigation of what their values are. A word I like to throw around with clients is needs. What are your basic needs in life? Do you have a need to be recognised? You know, they talk about you get to a certain age, my age and beyond, and you feel invisible in the world. Well, for some people, that's fine. For others, that represents a real problem. So for someone to admit to the fact that they are anxious about being invisible can be too much for them, and they hide behind one of their self-constructed roadblocks. But the clients where we have a really successful outcome are the clients who say, yep, this is how I feel. I need this. I need to have lots of friends. I need to be loved. I need to learn. I need to do. I need to help. Once you get to bedrock, then everything tends to flow.
Let's finish on a high. Can you give us an example of somebody you've really turned a light on for them, or that they were going in one direction, and after a few sessions with you that their world expanded or went where they wanted to go, even if they didn't know if they wanted to go that way at the beginning?
I think a model in that regard would be someone who came to see me pre-retirement. And he was anxious. I should say, I tend to have as many female as male clients. This is not exclusively the domain of male clients. He was really worried about what would happen when he stepped off the work platform. And it took a while for me to help him discover what his anxieties were. And then at about the 4th session, I think we saw the light go on. And he suddenly realised that there was a rich set of activities that connected with his values and needs. And then in the last session or two, we've developed those as some activities, and he went away a happy person as a result, because we got to the bottom of it as far as we could go, and then he could feel that he was coming up the curve and could then, and as he did, successfully retire some months later.
It's fascinating because almost what you're dealing with is in common sense, but often common sense can be uncommon.
It's extremely common sense, and as I think I said before, my job is to ask good questions and be curious in this positive sense, not curious as in odd, not as in someone who wears a pink jacket, but curious as in really
I was going to ignore that. But
wanting to know what's going on inside my client's mind. So yes, it's asking good questions, being curious, and then the rest is just listening to what comes back. So clients do almost all the talking.
I would imagine, obviously, the pre-retirement phase is when you think you can be most help to most people, but is that correct?
That is correct, but I can also help them in the early years of retirement. The age range would be roughly 55 to late 60s. Probably beyond that, if people are retired for a long period of time, there's not a lot of help I can give them.
Do you notice the difference between, say, people who've worked in the public service and people who've worked in a private enterprise, or people who've worked in a big firm? Is there any generalisations that you've noticed and any learnings?
That's a great question. I would think for me, most of my clients are white collar. So they come from a services professional background. Yeah. And so they know what it's like to work in a company. And therefore, as I said before, crossing that bridge where they lose the routine, lose the validation, is something they really get. Whereas other people in different walks of life may have worked that out when they were 30 or 40.
Presumably, small business owners are probably a very small part of the domain you deal with.
Not wanting to sound macabre, they may be in what I call the pine box category, the people who work forever. And that's fine. There's nothing I can help them with. If that's their decision, if that's their destiny, good luck to them.
Jon, thanks for talking to us today. It's been fascinating.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.